Hi, welcome to Talking Text. The passage is Luke in chapter 4 and from verse 9. And he took him to Jerusalem and set him on the pinnacle of the temple and said to him, If you are the Son of God, throw yourself down from here, for it is written, He will command His angels concerning you to guard you, and on their hands they will bear you up, lest you strike your foot against a stone. And Jesus answered him, It is said, You shall not put the Lord your God to the test. Here is the temptation that Jesus is facing to test God, to throw himself off the mountain and let God catch him, to make God act on his behalf according to his timing. Interestingly enough, the next story in Luke chapter 4, the people of Nazareth chase Jesus to a cliff and they try to throw him off the cliff, but he escapes and walks through uncaptured. God protects him from being thrown down. But it was God's provision and timing, not his. And so Jesus doesn't take it upon himself to presume to take God's timing or God's provision or protection. And perhaps we've been tempted in the same way, the temptation to think that God is not acting how we think he should, or acting in the time that we think he should. I want to encourage you to keep trusting God's timing and his ways. Adam and Eve were tempted similarly. They were tested God by asking, did God really say that you couldn't do this? Is God really good? Does he really love us? Is it really going to be as God said? And that's the temptation, is to sort of doubt that God is going to do what he said he would do, and that what God said is reliable. And of course, we ourselves go through that, and Israel as a nation went through that in Exodus 17. They had seen the miraculous provision of deliverance from God in Egypt. They'd seen provision in the desert, but they get to a place in the wilderness in Exodus 17 where they complain against God. They say, oh, we're just out here to die. There's no food. God, you're not providing. It's not how we thought it should be. And in fact, they get to the point where they say, is God even among us? Perhaps you've got to that place where you've asked, is God even still with me? I want to encourage you to not be tempted to face that and to give into that pressure to say, oh, God's left me. You know, Jesus was completely faithful to all of God's will, but not only that, he then said he would never leave or forsake us. He was actually abandoned on the cross by the Father, and that moment when the weight of the sin of the world was upon him. And he did all of that so that we would never be abandoned. He would always be with us. So the answer to the question, is God even among us, is yes. Jesus will never leave us or forsake us. And so that's a great comfort when we face this temptation. Again, we don't overcome just by knowing a couple of Bible verses, but more than that, we know our scriptures, but we also know and believe and experience that Jesus is always faithful, his great faithfulness, and he's always with us. He never leaves us. Even when our faithfulness is weak, his is never weak. His is always perfect. I want to encourage you to remember and rely upon the faithfulness and the nearness of Jesus. Thanks for letting the text talk.